How are you all? I hope everyone's well. So my name is Tom Dawson, as you just heard. I work with SCAPE as well as the university, and we've been working for the last 25 years on coastal heritage and sites that are at risk from climate. And okay, I'm just trying to work out how this works. Sorry, I'm a little bit unused to Zoom. Okay, so when the sea hits the coast, it can cause traumatic impacts, as we see here at the Churchill barriers. And we've heard this morning about how climate is exacerbating natural processes. And we have a whole series of different reports, both at national level. So the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change makes reports every few years telling us what is going to happen globally. And they've been fairly accurate with everything they've been saying. In fact, they may have been slightly underplaying how the changes will come. But we also have national reports. And in the UK, we have reports like this. And this is quite a recent one. Okay. However, how those impacts will affect heritage sites is something that has been something that archaeologists have been thinking about for many, many years. And my colleague and friend Marcy Rockman has done a great deal of work with this when she worked with the National Park Service over in America. And one of the early bits of work that Marcy and her colleagues did over there was to look at all the different impacts and look at how those would affect different types of heritage sites, both archaeological sites and museum collections and things like that. And you can see there that sea level rise and storm surges and storms are very impactful, and they are at the top of the list, causing submersion, erosion, inundation, etc. So what does coastal erosion look like? I'm going to give you an example from Balasher, which is an island just off of North Uist and the west coast on the Western Isles of Scotland. And here we see an aerial photograph of the coastline as it was in 1946 in purple. And that coastline, just on the edge of it, there was this very large archaeological site. And for many, many years, people have been picking up pottery, seeing stone structures in the section, and occasionally human remains had been found. And so in the late 1980s, a group of archaeologists went in and they cleaned up the section, and they could see that there were several meters of archaeological deposits all on top of each other. Now, a second aerial photograph taken in 1992 actually shows that there'd been very little erosion in the 46 odd years between the two sets of photographs. So although it looked as though there was a big problem here, probably only about a meter of the site had eroded. Now, a meter of erosion is quite a lot, and that was enough to cause archaeological remains to come out. But that was nothing compared to what happened in 2005 when a storm hit the Western Isles, and overnight this happened. That's up to about 50 meters of erosion in one single night. And most of the site was completely destroyed in that event. These are a number of Iron Age structures which ended up on the beach, and where the people are gathered around, they're excavating a complete Iron Age pot. And there were all sorts of bone artifacts scattered along the beach. There were human remains, all sorts of things after that. But the archaeological remains were only exposed for a very short period of time. And within a few weeks, the sand had blown in again, had covered up those remains. And so if you hadn't gone back and looked at that site, or if you hadn't noticed the site had eroded in the first place, you wouldn't even have known that something had happened after a few months. The whole site had completely disappeared again. So I have a series of questions that I'm going to pose throughout this talk. And the first one is, should we attempt to save threatened sites? Now, you might think this is a no-brainer, and I'm not actually going to answer that question, but what I'm going to show you is some of the sort of threatened sites that we have here in Scotland. So this is my colleague Joanna, and from her shoulders upwards, you can see midden material going all the way up to that line of white shells near the top of the section, and that midden material contains pottery. It's a lot of peat ash in there from the fires that they were burning, and there's all sorts of artifacts, bits of bone, fish bone, and all the rest of it within that. And then round about her waist, you can see another layer of midden material, that dark sand. And to the side of her, you can see a corbelled roof. This is a beehive roof, which belongs to a structure. We don't know the date of this. We don't really have any information about it whatsoever. It's probably prehistoric. It could be very early. We just don't know. but this is the typical site that we find at the coast. Here is another one, a large eroding prehistoric dry stone structure up in Orkney. And here in Shetland, my former colleague Ellie is looking wistfully at a hole in the ground, and you have that whole section, and you can see there burnt material, you can see bits of walls, and that little hole that she's looking at, when that was cleaned out, that actually was the top of a well with a number of steps that went down and which contained burnt material. So I think that we probably should try to save some of these sites, but that's not a given. But if we are going to save sites, which sites should we work at? Well, we could turn to World Heritage and see what the World Heritage sites say. We could maybe prioritize those. So if we look at a map of the World Heritage sites across the world, we see plenty of dots, and all the yellow ones are cultural heritage sites. But of course, that's the whole world. So if we zoom in on Italy, this is the country with the greatest density of World Heritage sites of any country in the world. And we can see all the World Heritage sites there. And at a national level, it isn't actually that many. And when we come to Scotland, although we have 3 down in the lowlands there, it looks like we have very, very few on the northern part of the mainland, and we have 1 over in St Kilda, and the one up at the very top is Skara Brae in the Orkney Islands, which I will come back to later. So using World Heritage sites isn't going to work, although a lot of people think that World Heritage sites these are the ones that we should be thinking about when we talk about climate change, especially when you're doing large European projects and things. But in fact, the World Heritage sites are fairly atypical of what's out there. Luckily, each nation also tries to preserve its own heritage. And so we have legally protected sites. And in the UK, the published data is from England, not Scotland, I should note here. But here it says that we have the Secretary of State for Culture keeps a list of buildings and scheduled ancient monuments, and these are legally protected. Sites are put up for scheduling, they're nominated, and then they're looked at, and then if they are scheduled, they're added to the schedule. So these are legally protected sites. However, the system in Italy is slightly more complex, where they have a general secretariat and 8 general directions, all looking at the different types of heritage. And as it says here, the wealth and quality is well known, but there is no complete official data on its size. So in Italy, we don't have a full picture. And if we look at the way that they do things in Iceland, it says here, all man-made heritage in Iceland, which is 100 years or older, is protected by law. So everything which is over 100 years is protected. So each nation has different ways of protecting sites. And those protected sites are perhaps the ones that we should be working with, but maybe not every single valuable site is getting into that list of protected sites. And in the case of Iceland, perhaps there are sites which aren't so valuable, but they are protected because they're over 100 years old. So what is important then is to have informed decision making. If we're going to decide which sites we should be saving and which ones we shouldn't, because we probably can't save everything, then we need to have the information. And in Scotland, we, that is SCAPE and the University of St Andrews, have been working with our government organisation, Historic Environment Scotland, and with Algeo, the local government archaeological officers, but also with numerous community groups all around the country. And this is just a small selection of the community groups that we're working with. We've been working with them in order to try to gather the information that we need to make the decisions that are important. We've been doing this through coastal zone assessment surveys. These started right back in the 1990s, and they are still ongoing. And at the moment, we are running a program of community coastal zone assessment surveys. We will be doing a survey just here in St Andrews next week, in fact, going from St Andrews all the way around to Tayport. And generally in a survey, we will double the number of sites. So all the ones in red were previously known sites, but the ones in green were new sites that were found during the coastal zone assessment survey. The information is recorded in a standardized way, which means it can be put into a database and compared. And here is an example of a site that was known locally, but wasn't on any national historic environment record until we did the survey. And this is a herring boat ship graveyard or herring boat. Yeah, a ship graveyard of herring boats. And there's 12 of them in that picture. And thanks to the survey, this is a site which is now on the records. And because it's on the records, it can now be considered. We have the information that we need to consider it for further work. So once we've managed to gather all our data together, we then have to think, are all sites equal? Probably not. This is where we bring in the questions of value. Okay, so if I were to put this picture by Leonardo da Vinci up in an auction, I could probably get an estimate of how much money I'd get, and it would obviously be a lot of money, but I can sort of say, yes, I know what the value of that is. With the Lascaux cave paintings, it's a little bit more difficult to get a value, but usually we would just say that this is priceless. We would never even think of selling something like a cave painting. These are priceless. These belong to all of us. It's a World Heritage Site. This is something that we absolutely have to look after. But if I were to put this picture that I just drew up for auction, I might get £10 or very little money indeed. However, if I told you that in fact it wasn't me that drew this, but this was done by Picasso, suddenly the value will change. And what I'm trying to do here is show that value is something that is very subjective. It goes in waves. Some things are in favor, some things are popular, they become more valuable, and then the value can crash. So trying to work out a monetary value for heritage can be quite problematic. And certainly in the case of the Weems Caves, and I'll be coming back to the Weems Caves later, we have a number of carvings, Pictish carvings. These are well over 1,000 years old. Trying to ascribe a value to these is very difficult indeed, but unfortunately at the moment these carvings are vulnerable. So recently at SCAPE and with the University of Stirling and with Historic Environment Scotland and colleagues from America, we did a project called Learning from Loss, where we visited a number of community groups all around the country. And if you do a Google search on our YouTube channel, which is at Coast Archaeology, you'll be able to see a film that we made about this. And in that film, we discuss values. And we discussed three different types of value. There's intrinsic value. This is the value of the heritage site because of its uniqueness, because of what it is. This is its intrinsic value. But there's also the social value. This is the value to the local community or to the nation or whatever. And then, of course, we have the economic value. And it's these three values competing with each other that helps us to define which sites are more valuable than others. Right. Once we've defined the value of our site, so first of all, we go out, we need to find out where all the sites are, we need to describe them, we need to get them into a database, and then we need to put some form of value on that. And we can do that in a rough and ready way, but at least we need to get some sort of value in. Once we've done that, we can use GIS, we can use modeling to see how vulnerable the sites may be from coastal processes in the future, how erosion may affect those sites, and we can work out the threat to those sites. And then if we combine the value with the threat, we can come up with an idea of the priority of the site. So obviously a site which is valuable but which isn't under threat is a lower priority than a site which is valuable and is under threat. And this is a project that we did for the 12,000 sites that have been recorded in Scotland in the coastal zone assessment surveys. So these are 12,000 sites within 50 metres of the coast edge. And where there are dots, there have been surveys. So any area without any dots means there's been no survey done there. And after our prioritization project here, we ended up with about 1,000 valuable sites, high priority sites, I should say, sites which were both threatened and of high value out of the 12,000. So at least we'd managed to make the problem slightly more manageable. But we needed to ensure that the data was up to date as well. As I said, some of these coastal surveys started back in the 1990s. And that means that those sites could have been washed away in the intervening years, or they could have been excavated, or in some cases they may have even improved. The situation may have improved. Sand may have been pushed up against them, or a seawall may have been built. So we need to ensure that the data we have is up to date. And we started a project just over 10 years ago called the Scotland's Coastal Heritage at Risk Project. And in that we took all of the data from all of the prioritized sites. We put all 12,000 sites, and in fact, that's gone up to 15,000 now. We put them all onto a map. So if you zoomed in onto that map, you'd see more and more and more dots. And we also made an app so that you could look at this data while you're on your mobile phone. You can use your phone to navigate to sites. You can click on a dot. You can bring up all the information. But more importantly, you can update that information. You can take photographs. You can send over comments and things like that. And also, as you'll see there, there's a button for Add Heritage Site. You can actually tell us about new things that have recently been exposed at the coast edge. So we did a number of training sessions with members of the community, and here you see a group walking around, and you can see above their heads in the section there a huge amount of stonework from a prehistoric building. And we went out, showed people how to use the app, how to record things, and people have been sending us information ever since. So once you've got all of that information, what can we actually do about these eroding sites? What action can be taken? Well, the most obvious thing would be preservation in situ. We can build a defence. We can build a wall to stop the sea coming in and washing away our heritage. I'm in St Andrews in Fife at the moment, and this is St Andrews Castle as it appeared in 1580. And here we see a similar view of the castle, but in 1693. And by that stage, erosion had caused part of the walls to collapse down onto the beach. Here is a photograph, a very early photograph from 1846. And you can see that the erosion is being caused because of the rock structure. It is sandstone, and you can see there are caves in there. And every now and then, parts of the rock were collapsing, and it would bring part of the castle down. And so if you were a tourist looking at that same view today, you would see this. And in fact, much of what you're looking at is a coastal defence. It is a wall that was built by the predecessors of Historic Environment Scotland. And here is an image of that wall being built. Right back in 1885, it was decided to defend a historic monument. Okay, so that was a decision that was made. It was decided that that site was valuable enough to warrant spending the money to build a wall on it. And there are a number of buildings and structures and historic and archaeological sites around Scotland that have sea walls. This is Skara Brae, the World Heritage Site I mentioned before, with its amazing Stone Age furniture. It's stone dressers and stone beds on either side of the walls. But if you were to look at that site from the sea, you would see here this massive coastal defence wall, which is protecting the site from the sea. And of course, Skara Brae itself was uncovered in a storm originally. The problem with building coastal defences is that the sea will hit that defence and then it will come around the sides, as you can see there. So in the background, that is Skara Brae, and we can see that there's exacerbated erosion on either side of it. This means that you have to keep replenishing and repairing your coastal defences. Quite often you have to add to them in order to stop the sea coming round the side or going underneath. And if you don't keep spending money on your defences, they will fail. Going back to Weems, which is where those carvings were, this is a defence in front of one of the caves. It was actually built to defend a water pipe, and you can see that all of the sediment on the beach has been washed away and the sea has gone underneath and is causing all of this erosion. So not only is that water pipe now destroyed, but those layers that are exposed contain medieval archaeology. And some coastal defences will actually be toppled over by the sea. Once the sediment from behind them has disappeared, the defence is virtually useless and will just collapse, as you can see here. Building defences, therefore, is an expensive matter, and it's something that you have to think about for the long term, because you will have to keep repairing them in the future. So if we can't afford defences, then what? So this is a case of preservation in situ versus preservation by record. And preservation by record is the bread and butter for most archaeologists, especially those working in the commercial sector. This is what you do every time somebody wants to build a railway or a supermarket or something like that. You go out and you excavate that site, which otherwise will be destroyed by the new buildings. The thing is, with preservation by record and commercial archaeology, we have a polluter who can pay. We use the polluter pays principle, which means that the developer will pay for the archaeological work. When it comes to climate change and natural processes, it could be argued that we're all polluters, but it's very hard to actually point the finger at any one organization and say, you should pay for this or you should pay for that. Okay, so we do have a slight problem, but I do think it's worth thinking that we need to regard the mitigation of coastal erosion in the same way that we think about the mitigation of sites which are being affected by development. So, as part of the Scotland's Coastal Heritage at Risk project, we decided to test several ways of working with heritage sites with local communities. We wanted to find low-cost solutions that we could come up with and see how they worked. And I'm going to give you a few examples now. So one is rescuing or retrieving the information. So this is an archaeological dig, basically. It happened up in Brora in Sutherland, up north of Inverness, and the local community there had told us about a wall that they'd seen coming out of the section, and within a year, that wall had collapsed, and we could see on either side a ground surface and a paved surface inside of a building. And so we mounted an excavation with the local community. And I'm proud to say that in this picture, there is only one professional archaeologist. Everybody else is a member of the local community. And they worked away, and we did this over several seasons. And we uncovered what was the earliest and best preserved early post-medieval building in the Highlands of Scotland. This was associated with the salt industry, where they were taking seawater and using local coal to evaporate the seawater to produce salt. During the excavation, we used laser scanning and structure from motion and various other techniques. We recovered all the artifacts and we did a full archaeological excavation. Here we see a fireplace, and on the fireplace you can see that there was graffiti, and here is some of that graffiti. And we managed to do all the recording, which was just as well, because a couple of years after we had finished doing the excavation, the entire site was destroyed in a storm, as you can see here. But the knowledge was retained. The knowledge was retained, and the local community have used that knowledge and historical research, which shows how salt was made. And here you can see some gentlemen putting wet salt crystals into wicker baskets to allow them to dry out. And the structure that he's standing next to there is a salt pan. This is a tank full of salty water with a fire underneath it. We learned from things like this, and the local community have now made their own salt pan, which they've made up at their heritage centre, and they do regular open days where they show people how to make salt, and it gives them a way into talking about coastal erosion, about the heritage of Brora, about the past. And here we see some salt in a wicker basket getting ready to be dried out. Another project we did was a relocation project. So we went up to the island of Sandy in Orkney, working with the Sandy Archaeology Group. And here we were working on a burnt mound. Now, burnt mounds are found in Ireland, all over Britain and over in Scandinavia, and they are basically piles of burnt stones. So this is an inland example. And what happened was people burnt the stones and then placed them in a trough or a tank, which was buried in the ground, filled with water. And it's thought that the hot stones then heated the water up for reasons which we don't know, maybe a sauna, maybe to cook food, maybe for bathing. There was a large storm, and one of these troughs was found on the beach. And when it was found, and you can see that in the center of the picture, when it was found, it was thought that it might be a grave. And so a team was sent up to excavate the human remains, because if we have human remains in Scotland, we have to excavate them. We can't just leave them lying on the beach. However, it soon became apparent that this wasn't a grave. This was actually part of a very unusual burnt mound structure. It's unusual because there were actual rooms within it. Normally you just find the tank. So the team left after uncovering everything. They made a basic report, well, very good basic report. They were only there for a few days. And then the sea came back and it pushed stones over and the site was covered up again. But the local community could see that the site was being destroyed by the action of the waves and by the stones continually moving on the beach. And so they wanted to relocate all of those stone structures over to their heritage centre. So we worked with them, we cleaned up the beach, we took all the stones away, and then we excavated down to the layers so that we could see the site as it had been left by AOC Archaeology. And here you can see the site after we'd cleaned it up. And at the top, the horseshoe structure is a well. And in the middle, you can see a tank. And then there's a passageway leading from the tank, which is going to a hearth cell, which at that stage is actually buried underneath the grass on the right-hand side of the picture. And you can see some little rooms on either side of the passageway. The well was very well made. It was deep. It still had fresh water in it, even though it was on a beach. And there is me down the well. It was full of environmental remains. And there are some of them as we're sieving them. And as you can see, there were beetles, there were marine shells, there were bits of organic material, vegetation, seeds, and whatever. However, our primary aim was to move the structure. So we numbered up every single stone with its own unique number, took photographs, did detailed surveys, and then we lifted each of the stones. Working with local farmers, we placed the stones up onto tractors and trailers, which we then drove across the island to the Heritage Centre, where we had already marked out the shape of the remains as they'd been surveyed on the beach. When we came to lift the base tank of the base slab of the sunken tank, a remarkable discovery was made. We lifted it up and found that there was a structure underneath it. And when this was cleaned up, we took samples, and these were radiocarbon dated, and this turned out to be a Neolithic structure. So we had a Bronze Age burnt mound, and up in the top left you can see the well of the Bronze Age structure, and in the middle you can see the Neolithic well. So for some reason they had come along in the Bronze Age time and had deliberately placed a flat slab of stone over their Neolithic well. So we wouldn't have known this if we hadn't taken all the site up and tried to relocate it. So there was an advantage in what we did. Eventually, we managed to rebuild everything. It took a fair amount of time, but we got it all there. And then it's a very small island, but this is a large proportion of the island population came out to the launch when we opened up the site, and the site is now interpreted. But there's also information not only at the site, but the site is right next to the Heritage Centre. There is information about other eroding sites on Sandy, about coastal erosion in general, and about this project. So that was done. It took us about 6 to 7 weeks to get that project completed. And then finally, recording projects. And here I am going to Wemyss. So this is just south of where I am in St Andrews. I'm just on the tip of the, well, I'm just a little bit north of where that dot is. And this is where Wemyss is here, near Kirkcaldy. And there are a number of caves going all along the coast edge together with a castle at Wemyss. And in those caves, as I've already mentioned, there are Pictish carvings. So these ancient carvings all over the place. Some of these, unfortunately, have now been destroyed due to cave collapse. But there were some Pictish beasts there. But we also have animals. We have the leaping salmon, and we have this remarkable carving of a boat. And on the left-hand side, you can see a steering oar and a person holding it. And then you can see all the other oars elsewhere. And this could well be a Pictish boat, a remarkable carving. We also have a number of Christian crosses. This is because St Andrews was a very large pilgrimage centre, and people walking on the coast would have gone into the caves, and they have left their marks. And we have graffiti. And on the left-hand side there, you can see William Wallace, not the William Wallace, dating to 1861, but we have a cave full of modern graffiti or Victorian graffiti like this. Now, Wemyss is subject to erosion, and this has been ongoing for many, many years. But also we have an unstable coast. So with increased rainfall, you get slippage. And here you can see one of the caves, and a couple of trees have just slid down after a very, very wet period, a period of rainfall, and has blocked up the entrance to the cave. So we worked with York Archaeological Trust, with different parts of York Archaeological Trust, and we did a DGPS survey, a very accurate survey, putting in control points, and we also used laser scanning. and the whole of the coastline and all of the caves were laser scanned. And so we have this very high resolution model. And this is inside one of the caves. And you can see up there highlighted is one of the Pictish carvings. The laser scans are great because we can make profiles through. So here we are able to look at Macduff's Castle and one of the caves, and we can see how the two relate to each other. But also it allows us to work out where sea levels are. And you can see that in front of the cave, there is a sort of little a ridge of earth with the trees just to the right-hand side of it. If that ridge of earth were to go away, the sea would just go in. And with some of the other caves, it's even more extreme. The sea could get in very, very quickly. So having this data is very much helping us understand future threats. We have also used drones. So this project started in 2014, so 12 years ago now. So we did our first drone survey 12 years ago. And we take thousands of photographs, we stitch them together, and we make 3D models of the coast edge, such as this. But we have been doing regular surveys ever since. So every year we go out and we take surveys. So you can see here, this is the coast or a part of the coast in 2014. You can see a large sewage pipe up on the right-hand side with two blocks of stone. Watch those two blocks of stone. But also, please look at the path and the area to the left-hand side of the rocks when we go to our latest survey in 2026. Now, in that area which is eroded where the path used to be, 2 years ago, this was exposed as well. In fact, there were two burials, and there have been burials in the past from this area as well. And so our monitoring of the rate of erosion in this area is helping us to determine how quickly we may lose parts of the coast in this area. Another technique that we used was reflectance transformation imaging, or RTI. And in this, we took a number of photographs of the individual carvings, but in each photograph, the light source was moved to a different position. So you're basically shining a torch and moving it all around in a circle so that the light is hitting the carving in different directions. And this is something that can be done with members of the community as well. And so the members of the community and the local group were trained up, and they actually completed the RTI survey of the caves. We also collected photographs, old photographs from members of the public, and we did an oral history project, and we recorded people speaking about their memories of how the caves were used in the past. We had school journeys down, lots of school trips, people looking all over the place. And we also made some films. And one of these is Standing on the Shoulders of Giants. And I would definitely recommend that. All of that information was put together on a website called the 4dweemscaves.org website. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's definitely worth visiting. And it is worth noticing that this was made in 2014 and 2015. However, what you would do is you would click on one of those orange arrows, and there you would enter the cave, and then you can look around, you can select a carving, you click on the carving, and then that brings up the RTI. And as you move your mouse, it's as if you're shining a virtual torch. And you change the position and it brings up different parts of the carving. You can also click in the bottom to have a look at old rubbings or old depictions that were done in the 19th century of the various carvings. And I should point out that in the top left-hand corner there, you can also get access to the videos and photographs of everything. Now, this project won a prize, and the only reason I'm putting this picture up is because on the right-hand side there, you can see Gavin, who is the director of Archaeology Scotland, but at the time he was working with one of the York Archaeological Trust member organisations. But there is Gavin in London picking up his prize. So hopefully in this very rapid talk, I've been able to show that it's not all doom and gloom, that there are things that we can do. We need to take a staged approach, but I very much hope that you can see that coastal erosion does present opportunities. It gives us a chance to work at sites that maybe we wouldn't normally be able to work at. It allows us to bring the communities in. It allows the communities to take ownership of something which is important to them. And so I thoroughly recommend that you get out onto the coast, have a look around, and if you see anything, please let us know. Thank you very much. Oh, by the way, I should say, if you want to contact me, these are my emails. And if you want to see our socials, that is the web address. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Tom. That was extremely interesting. I have to say, I live in Golspie, just down from Brora, so I know the project well up in Brora. And I suppose also maybe although it's not ideal, coastal erosion, as you say, potentially uncovers sites that we never knew existed. So although we don't like coastal erosion, sometimes I guess we find things that we wouldn't have known about otherwise. I have a few questions for you if you have time to answer them, if that's okay.
Mhm.
The first question is from 2 seconds. Let me just get the chat up here. It's from Erin, who's in Ontario, in Canada. And she says, here we have preservation techniques being used to preserve sand dunes, most notably at Sandbanks Provincial Park. Grasses, etc., are paramount for holding on to the sand. Are natural techniques being used currently to prevent erosion?
Mhm. Yep, that's a great question. So here at St Andrews is famous, maybe not so much for its university, but more for its golf course. And the golf course is a links course, so it's a sand dune course, and it is being affected by erosion. But at the golf course, there is a continual program of planting grasses, marram grasses, which are then fenced off so that the public can't get in there. The problem is that every now and then you will get a big storm that comes in and will wash things away, but then you just start again. There's also beach nourishment going on as well, so where you move the sediment down to one end of the beach and then gradually it moves back up again. In the past at the St Andrews golf course, and I'm using the golf courses because in Scotland we have a number of golf courses, and they have a lot of money that can be spent on developing ways of trying to protect them. At the north end of the St Andrews golf course, we have a lot of concrete that was put there probably at the end of the Second World War, which was then covered in sand and then covered over with the grass. But in a storm last year, that was all washed away. So now you have just the concrete there. But hopefully the grass will be put over there again. We had a case over in the Western Isles where we had an archaeological site where we were getting aeolian erosion. So what happens here is the grass gets or the vegetation is disturbed for whatever reason, and then you get a little hole, and then the wind gets in and it starts blowing the sand away, and then the more it blows the sand away, it destroys the roots of the other grass, so then more and more grass dies, and so then you end up with one of these great big deflation holes or big holes. And what they did up there was they started putting down natural materials to stop the sand from moving in the first place, and then started putting the grass over it. The reason they were doing that is because there were a lot of Norse burials within this particular mound. The key to all of this, though, in that case, was to put a fence around it to stop the sheep and the cattle from getting in. And also, there was a holiday park near. Holiday park. There was a campsite nearby, and people were driving motorbikes over the site. But by putting a fence up and trying to stop animals and people getting in there, giving the grass a chance, that definitely worked. So yes, there is absolutely a place for natural for the use of grasses and things like that. I would say that at Brora, that's one of the things that we had tried there, but unfortunately it wasn't able to get into place in time. The grass is good for aeolian erosion, but it's not going to stop the sea.
Okay, thank you. Couple more questions. Claire has two questions. The first one is apps, toolkits, etc. come and go, but the SCAPE recording application has stood the test of time. Do you have advice around maintaining digital tools and interest in them?
Okay. Um, so we are very lucky in that we have been supported by Historic Environment Scotland for a number of years. So quite often what happens is people will put in a funding application and then they will get a project that is up and running, and that project will usually have a defined set of time that it is running for. So it could be 3 years, it could be 5 years. And the number of times, if you go on and look at a big EU project or something like this, and you go onto the website 6 years, 8 years later, it's usually error 404, the website's gone defunct and all the rest of it because the funding stopped. Because we've had this long-term support of Historic Environment Scotland, it's meant that we have been able to carry on and make improvements and updates and all the rest of it. So I would say that is the main thing. If you've got the people in place, then you're going to be able to keep updating things. So we regularly update our app and our website. So we work very closely with Mike Arrowsmith, who is partly here at the University of St Andrews and is also the chairman of the Save the Weems Ancient Cave Society. And I should say that anybody who is in the Weems area, they're having an open day, not this weekend, but next weekend. So get on down to the open day. But Mike has been great at helping us to develop and maintain our website and our app. And Mike was also responsible for making the latest iteration of the 4D Weems Caves website. But the main thing is just that we've been very lucky. There are some other places where government support or the government agency has come in and supported an organization on the long term. And it is something that I would definitely recommend if you're in a different country, is if you can try and get some sort of system like this. And to be quite honest, SCAPE was actually set up by what was then at the time Historic Scotland. So I think when they were setting this up right back in 1999, they had this idea that we need to make a mechanism where we can just like keep an organization going for a long time. So yes, it's all up to the personnel.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sheila asks here, is there public access to the Angus survey information at Bodin? If so, where?
It's on the SCAPE website. I would sincerely hope if you can't see it there, and I don't know if you can still see my email address, but please email me. But if you go to the SCAPE website and then you go to either look at the sites at risk map, you will see the site record for Bodden, but also under the reports, the report for Bodden should be there, I would hope. So yes. And also I would ask there, because I was going past on a train recently up to Aberdeen, and I looked across and it looked like another great big part of the wall at Bodden has come down. I should explain to everybody else, Bodden is an enormous lime kiln on the coast. It looks like a castle. It's absolutely enormous. But they were digging away. The limestone was actually all in the land around them. So they were digging away, digging away, digging away until they ended up with just them standing on this little peninsula, like the lime kiln was on this peninsula, and then they stopped. And then the sea has come in, and there's incredibly spectacular, the erosion at Bodden. And many years ago now, we did a laser scan survey of that. And I keep thinking I need to drive back and do a drone survey to compare it. So yes, so get in touch with me if you can't find the information.
Okay, thank you. And Claire asks, do you have a view, Ray, the nature-based solutions for coastal erosion in relation to heritage at risk?
I have a view. That sounds quite similar to the first question, but
Yeah.
yes, I do. I was so one of the things in on the island of Sandy, which I mentioned just now, where Muir is, the Muir Burnt Mound. Uh, the Sandy Development Trust are running a project in September, and we're going to be going up and doing a coastal survey. We're going to resurvey the island in September, and the Sandy Development Trust are looking at nature-based solutions as ways of trying to protect the coastline. So they will be doing planting, but one of the things they're very interested in is seeing how kelp can help to sort of large seaweed forests can help to dissipate the power of the waves as the waves are coming onto the beaches. And this is something that we are very interested as well. And we're kind of working with them at the moment. We're kind of hoping that we can get a project off the ground. We're actually in discussion. We were talking to them last week about this. So yes, I think there is definitely a role for nature-based solutions. But as I say, it's not going to help when you get one of these massive storms where you get a low pressure, 100-mile-an-hour wind, and the waves just coming straight in onto a sand dune. It's just going to it'll wash everything away. So, but it will definitely help. The grass planting will definitely help on the aeolian erosion side, and it is hoped that kelp could maybe mitigate the power of the waves a little bit. But usually, what happens after one of these storms, as you know, you just end up with a 2 meter high pile of kelp on the beach.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So last question I think is what are the main funding of well, as always, this is always the crucial thing, isn't it? What are the main funding opportunities for potential local projects to access? How easy are they to reach?
Okay, and is this in Scotland?
I think it must be, David. Is this in Scotland that you're asking about?
Oh, well, anyway, I'll
I
start.
think it must be. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, as I say, there are depends on the size of the project that you want to do and the amount of money you want to get. And unfortunately, things are becoming increasingly competitive, as everyone knows. But obviously, National Lottery Heritage Fund is a big one to go for, and you have different levels of funding. So if you're not going for something too ambitious, then that's much easier to access. And I would probably say that would be the main thing. That's as was the National Lottery gave us the funding for Scotland's Coastal Heritage at Risk project, or they were one of the funders, together with the Crown Estate at that stage and various local authorities. But there are small pots of money here and there, but it's not easy. I'm not going to deny that it's not easy. But Society of Antiquaries has very small pots of money. Historic Environment Scotland has pots of money that you can get in touch with their grants team, and there are various other organisations as well.
Yeah, there is at the moment there is the Highland Council are they have a coastal communities fund which they say will be relative to heritage as well. So it's about I think it's just really about looking, isn't it?
Yeah,
Signing up to the SCVO Funding Scotland so you get that information.
yeah.
Just a comment from Irene here. She just says, brilliant talk. SCAPE have been a great influence on my studies, recent graduate in archaeology, from my early days participating with SCAPE at Erskine and in Caithness. So
Oh
just
no.
some nice feedback
Oh.
there
Yeah.
for this talk. Okay, so I don't think there's any further questions as far as I can see. It just really um, it's for me just to say thank you so much, Tom, for giving up your time to do that amazing talk about coastal erosion. I should say that we also have a fourth pre-recorded talk by the team at the University of Bradford on their dig at Swandrow. So a kind of live excavation site happening at the moment. So that will be released on Sunday for anyone who's interested in the work that they're doing there. So just again, a site that is heavily threatened by coastal erosion, multi-period sites. So just really to let anyone know here who's not aware of that. And are you happy for me to share your contact details, Tom, if I do a
Yeah.
follow-up email to everyone? Yeah, perfect. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And thank you everyone for watching. I now have to run home because I got a message saying that my bees have just swarmed, and I need to go and try and collect them all again and get them into a hive before they annoy the neighbors too much.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye everyone.
Okay, bye.